Today we're going to look at making a solid surface cutting board. And really there are similar steps on this project to almost any other cutting board or sign that we make in VCarve, but we're going to use a few different tools, and we got to create a new tool path because the bit that we use is similar to ones we would use to cut out lumber, but it is a little bit different because it's actually an acrylic material. So I want to go through the steps and a little bit of design on making this solid surface cutting board. So solid surface cutting board looks like this. It's going to be finished on one side, and the back side is going to be a little bit dull. So part of what we're going to do today is show you how to create this juice ring at the offset tool. And I'm going to give you that W font as well as the outline of this cutting board. And you can adjust that if you'd like to. It's really kind of there because it's a pretty tried and true shape that a lot of people have used in the past. So to access this video, you're going to go to the Extra Credit CNC Project tab, and we don't have this video up here yet, but we do have the basic file that you are going to start with. So click the download button and open this up, and it's going to look just like this when you get it. Now, before we do anything else, whenever we open a file, I don't care if I created it or the most expert CNC machinist created it, we always want to double check our setup, because if we don't, we're fixing to make some mistakes that's going to wreck our machine or your project. So we're going to do that right up here under the file operations, this set job dimensions and origin. Now we are using that, it's actually a 1/2 inch thick solid surface material. So we want to double check this. And depending on how many classes you've had in here in the past or graphic design classes, we're going to call this our art board, is the blank that we're going to cut it out of. That should be 9.5 by 17. You can see that gives us a little bit of margin. So if you find one that is 9 by 17, that can still work. But much smaller than that, we run the risk of not having it fit. We want to run off of the machine bed, and we want our starting position to be the bottom left corner. So as long as these things are good, which they should be because this is the file that I've put there, I just want you to get into the habit of checking that. Notice the thickness is 0.47. We're going to run with that as our thickness. I've taken the micrometer or the caliper and measured the board that I cut out for the example, and they're pretty consistent at that. You know, if we need to make changes, we can when we're at the CNC router, but that should give us a pretty good estimate of where we're at. So we're going to say, okay, all right, we're not going to worry about that yet. What I'm going to do now is just come over here to tool paths and delete all of them, because this was a file that I had some tool paths written and some things have changed. So I don't want you to have those tool paths on there. In fact, I may erase that for the video, but if there's any tool paths on there, erase them right away, especially because you may do something different. So if you like the shape, you can leave the shape. If you want to change the shape a little bit, there are some tools over here that you can do it. You could even erase this all together and do a completely different shape if you wanted to. This circle tool, if you want to make the circle bigger, you can put in a diameter, radius, all those things here that I'm certain you could figure out. But if you wanted to change some things, you can use tools on here. Like let's say I wanted that to be a hump instead. If I select this and I hold down shift and I select this, you can see I can add different radiuses in there. I can change it to be whatever I want. And so if you want to play with that or change it to something that you like better, feel free to do that. You have complete freedom here. This just happens to be a template that I am giving you to speed things up a little bit. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do is put that juice ring in here. Most cutting boards have that. If you don't want it, you don't have to do it. But because this is kind of a complicated shape, the easiest way to get that offset is to click the whole shape. Now, if you have customized this shape at all, and maybe you click here and it just selects a little line segment here, you're going to have to join those vectors. So you can select all, and I want to get rid of the W. And then if you hit this join open vectors, that will close any open ends or any geometry that's open and not a complete circle. VCarve loves complete shapes. And so if you have edited that at all, you want to make sure that when you click on one part of it, the whole thing gets selected. All right, so I've got the whole thing selected, and I want to come down here to this offset tool. And we're going to offset inward, and we're going to offset in 1/2 of an inch. and you want to say, don't have the original deleted. We're going to say offset. And if you like how that looks, then hit close. If you want to have a bigger offset, go for it. Make an inch offset. But it's going to get pretty skinny up here if we make too much more of an offset. Don't make any less, because we're going to put a round over on the edge of this with the router. And we don't want that to cut into our juice ring. So I'm going to say close. So we've got our outside cut, and we've got our juice ring. Now you got to decide what you want to do up here. So if you're a person who likes a hole, you could, let's say we want a hole that's 1/2 inch in diameter. You can get this thing to snap kind of in the center there, and those snaps just kind of happen. You can move it where you want and say close. So if you were going to just hang this up, maybe you got a hook in your kitchen you want to hang it on, you could do the hole there. You could really do whatever shape that you want to do. If you want to do a last name, so my last name starts with an S. If I want to put an S here, whoops, I can change the size. Let's make it 1 inch tall and hit close. And I could change the font on there. I want to rotate it. And then I'll move it up there. I think I want to make it just a hair bigger, so I'm going to grab a handle. And let's say I like that S. You could really do this however you want. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways when we cut these out, to either cut between the 2 lines or cut on the outside line. And I'll give you a warning that if you want to fill in, cut out like the whole W or the whole S or whatever your last name is, it's going to be pretty small, and probably the geometry of the router bit's not going to fit in there. So you'll probably want to outline the letter so it fits in. So I'm just taking this W because I'm going to use the W, and I can zoom in a little bit to make sure that this is exactly centered where I want it to be. I think that looks fine. Okay, now we're going to use a V-bit to do the engraving. And if you think about a V, the deeper I go, the wider that gets. And so it's always easier to start out shallow. And if I want to go deeper, go deeper. I don't know if you can see this, but this W got kind of deep on here, and some of the geometry kind of faded together. So I'm going to go just a little bit lighter on that, knowing that I can always change this when I'm at the machine to make it cut deeper if I want it to. So I'm happy with how that looks. You can change it. If you want to engrave things down here, feel free to engrave things down here. Do it however is going to make you happy. So now we've got a tool path this thing. Let's see if I can get this a little bigger. There we go. So it's a tool path that I want to start from my inside cut and work my way out. Meaning I don't want to cut out the outside shape until the very end. I want to do all the machining of the juice ring and the W while it's still in place. So we got a couple choices to make. I want the W to be a little bit lighter of a cut than the juice ring. So I'm going to start with the lightest first, and I'm going to do a profile tool path. That means my router bit is going to follow my lines. That profile tool path, I'm going to make it 1/16 of an inch deep. And we got to select the tool that we want to use. We want to use a V-bit at 90 degrees. And this is going to be in our router. I'm just going to check real quick. And it is correct. This is tool number 4. So where it says tool number, make sure that that says 4. It's got 2 flutes, pass depth. We can make the pass depth 125. Spindle speed is good. Feed rate is good. Plunge rate is good. That all looks good there. So make your settings look exactly the same as mine and hit apply. Really important that that tool number is number 4 so it knows which tool to switch to. Then I'm going to say select. So V-bit, 1/2 inch, 1/16 of an inch deep. We want to go right on the W. I'll move my picture out of the way so we can see it here. We don't need any ramps because it has a cutter on the tip. We only need a ramp when we're doing something that doesn't have a cutter on the tip, like an end mill that doesn't have a point on it, like a drill bit. And I'm going to call this W. Oops. And calculate. Okay, W worked. Go back to the 2D view. I'm going to do the juice ring. So the juice ring, I'm going to close this. I'm going to again do a profile tool path, but I'm going to make it just a little bit deeper. I'm going to make it 1/8 of an inch deep. And you can go a little bit shallower if you want. Let's just double check. We've still got the same bit. It still says tool number 4. We're golden there. We're going to go right on it. We don't need a ramp. We're going to call this and hit calculate. Perfect. So now I've got the juice ring and the W. You're going to use the same tool, so that's good. We don't want to have the router switch tools because it just takes a long time to switch tools. So we're going to use the same tool. The first cut is just shallower than the second cut. Now we're going to go back to the 2D view, and we're going to do the outside cut. So on the outside cut, make sure nothing else is selected on the inside. And we're going to close this. And we're going to make another profile tool cut. But our material, we're just going to say it's a 1/2 inch thick. We know it's a little bit less. We're going to make our cut 0.505. That way we know that we're cutting all the way through this product. The tool needs to change. So I've got this bit called the 375 acrylic bit. I've already made it. If you haven't made it, you'll have to follow these steps. So I'm just going to create it again so you can see the steps for creating it. So we're going to come down here, and unless you see it here already, and we're going to hit add. So we're going to change this, and it already says acrylic bit here, so you can leave it. I would just change it to 0.375 acrylic bit, and if I change anything, it would say okay. Yours doesn't need to change. Yours will change, so you'll have the okay, but I don't need to change anything, so I say okay. Type is an end mill, units inches, and diameter is 0.375. Now we need to create the parameters. So the number of flutes on these is 1. So it's a little bit different bit. It only has 1 cutter head. My pass depth, the max pass depth, should be 0.505. That way I can cut all the way through in one pass. Step over is 0.15. That's totally fine. Spindle speed, we're going to kick it up to 18,000. We're going to say the feed rate at 200 inches a minute, and the plunge rate is at 2. And really important, this is in tool number 5. So we've created all of those things. We need to say apply. And for whatever reason, I put it in the V bits. That won't matter where that's at. But we just want to make sure that that bit is selected. And then we say close. Whoops, I forgot to select it. So I have to come back here and say select. And then it closes for me. Now, the machine vector, we want a machine on the outside of the line. We want the router bit to run here. We don't want it to run right on the line like we did with the V bit. And we need to add a ramp because this does not have a cutter head on the end. We need it to angle its way in. Once we got all that set, we can call it outside cut and hit calculate. It's going to give us a warning that it's going to cut all the way through a material. We can say, okay, fine. All righty. Now, one thing I like to always do here is I'm going to say reset preview. That erases any preview that we may have. And we're going to say preview all tool paths. And if you want to see it happen a little bit slower, slow the speed down, say preview all tool paths, and we're going to get a preview of what this is going to look like. So you see that V-bit is deeper than the W. And then we're going to cut all the way through with that part. So if we're happy with how that looks, we can run with this. So what you would do at this point is you would come up here and go File, Save As, and I'd always find your network folder. So I'm going to find my network folder, and I have this in a file called CNC Woods class, and I'm going to call this Final SS Solid Surface Board. Save, and then you're going to come back to Canvas. My canvas obviously looks a little different than yours, but you are going to turn it in. I'm going to make a link right here that says turn in solid surface cutting board. You would click there, and it's assignment that's worth no points, and you would drop your cutting board right there so that we can go and find it, and then I'll run through the tool pathing with you, and then we'll cut it out. If you got any questions, feel free to ask a classmate or myself. I'm happy to help.